All right, we're off and running on the Krueg Show, August the 24th, 10:04 a.m. on the West Coast. That makes it 1:04 p.m. on the East Coast. Hope everybody's having a great day. We're looking ahead to 49ers Chargers. And with us is Daniel Popper, who covers the Chargers for The Athletic. And he's a good follow on Twitter as well. And he's with us on the Krueg Show to break it all down. Of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in Northern California. Daniel, thanks for the time. And let's talk a little bit about the Chargers. This is the third and final preseason game. How's the summer gone so far down there?
Yeah, I think it's been good. Anytime you're talking about training camp with the Chargers, you start with, did they get through it without any significant injuries? And they did that again this year. I think Brandon Staley has really made an effort to, I don't want to say tone things down in training camp, but just be really cognizant of how guys are feeling, not push them too hard. Like they're never going more than 3 days in a row, never more than 2 days in pads. And so that's really where you start. But the big thing with the Chargers this year is a new offensive coordinator in Kellen Moore and what that would mean for Justin Herbert, who just got that big contract. I think the one thing that's popped out so far in camp is that Kellen Moore is really going to emphasize pushing the ball downfield with Justin Herbert. It's going to be a high-flying offense, as it should be with the personnel that they have. But we've really seen Justin take that next step in terms of really attacking downfield and giving his guys a chance to make plays. And we'll see if it translates into production during the season, but that emphasis is definitely there. That's probably been the biggest takeaway from training camp.
How's their offensive line looking? Is Herbert going to have enough time to, survey the field and because he's got some great weapons, right? Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, just to name the starters, but there's even more behind those guys.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is the best offensive line they've had since I started covering the team in 2019. And that was like the priority for Staley when he took this job in 2021. They had not invested in their offensive line the way that they should have. And that was an area of weakness that Staley really identified when he got here. So they signed Corey Linsley in free agency, gave him the biggest contract ever given to a center. So he's still starting at center, a little bit older, but still a really high quality player, can be an all-pro level player at times. They've got two young guards. Zion Johnson was a first-round pick last year. Jamari Salyer was a revelation, sixth-round pick. They ended up kicking him out to left tackle when Rashawn Slater got hurt. He's moving to right guard this season. And then you've got two solid tackles. I mean, obviously, Rashawn Slater is an all-pro player coming off an injury to his bicep in week 3 last year. And then Trey Pipkins, a third-round pick they had in 2019, a really developmental guy that took a big step last year, who's just, a solid, like, middle-of-the-road, average right tackle, but you'll take that any day of the week when on the other side you have an all-pro level player. So they're going to, if they stay healthy, they will be able to protect the quarterback. They've got a lot of really good players up there, and it's something they've invested a lot of their resources in over the last 3 years.
My Super Bowl pick in July is, now early or late August is Niners Chargers, and I think we may see the rematch of Super Bowl 29. I just have I believe a lot in Tom Telesco, and I think he's one of the great GMs in the game. But it seems like everything starts with the health, and you mentioned it right off the rip. We know Keenan Allen here in the Bay Area. He went to Cal. He's a tremendous player. I think he's a top 10 NFL receiver when healthy, but that when healthy part is kind of tricky. How's he looking this summer? What do you think? I mean, is this finally the year that Keenan puts it all together?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like to a degree, Keenan got this injury reputation early on in his career because he missed a bunch of time. But after a couple injuries early in his career, he was one of the most consistent receivers in the NFL. You could pretty much write him down for 100 receptions, 1,100 yards, and 6 touchdowns year after year. It was like 4 straight years with that. Last year was his first injury in a long time. It was a nagging hamstring injury, kept him off the field for 7 games. But I mean, he's looked incredible through camp. I mean, he's doubled up pretty much every other receiver on the Chargers roster in terms of receptions during training camp practices. He had 4 touchdowns in yesterday's practice, the last practice of training camp. He looks outstanding. And the one thing I'll always bring up with Keenan is just the rapport that he has with Justin Herbert. I mean, they developed that over Herbert's entire career. They have an innate sense of where the other one is going to be at any given time. And so I'm expecting a huge year from Keenan. The one thing I'll say about Keenan and Kellen Moore's offense specifically is that Kellen has been moving guys around a lot more. The one thing that people got frustrated with in terms of Joe Lombardi's offense was just kind of how static it was. Keenan was playing like over 70% of his snaps in the slot. He was a slot only guy for the most part. What Kellen has come in and did is he's moved guys around a lot more. So you have Mike Williams playing in the slot a lot more. Mike Williams was among the lowest slot percentage of any receivers in the league over the last 2 years with, at least 100 receptions over that span. And so you're seeing guys moving around. And with Keenan, getting him on the outside and putting Mike Williams in the slot, it's created a lot more one-on-one opportunities for Keenan. And people think of him as a slot guy, but he's 6'3". And if you throw the ball up to him with his hands and hand-eye coordination and body control, like he's going to be able to make plays in those situations. And so I think with that little wrinkle to the offense, you're going to see Keenan Allen making a lot more plays downfield, along with that emphasis on pushing it downfield, like I was talking about earlier. So I'm expecting a big year from Keenan as long as he can stay healthy, obviously.
What's Quentin Johnston looking like? I mean, I saw him at TCU, big receiver. I mean, the Chargers have the biggest collection of receivers. I mean, Keenan's big, Williams is big, Johnston's big too. What kind of receiver is Johnston so far? Is he a vertical threat? And what kind of routes are they using him on?
Yeah, he can be a vertical guy. He didn't run the fastest 40. I think he was like a 4.52 guy, but I don't know if that's a good indication of how he can sort of access that part of the field. Like he's got a tremendous acceleration and explosion, and he can get to that area of the field and beat corners deep. But the best part of his game is yak. Like he's going to be a yak monster. The comparison I always draw, and it's a good one for this show right now, is Brandon Ayuk. How the 49ers use him in terms of a yak monster. A lot of in breaking routes, digs, slants, get him the ball in situations where he can just take it and run. Even jet sweeps. So that's how they view Quentin Johnston. When he's in those situations, he's extremely explosive. Like he is special after the catch. The problem is he has to catch the football. And that's been the biggest issue with him. I mean, he led the NCAA in drops last year with 8 drops. And, during the scouting process, you could watch him and say, hey, there's a lot of focus drops on this tape. And I think when you draft a guy, you hope that that's an anomaly. That has not been an anomaly so far. And that has really translated. He's dropped a lot of balls. He's dropped balls in preseason games. He's dropped balls in 11-on-11. He's dropped balls in 7-on-7. He's dropped balls on routes against the air and individual drills. That's a part of his game that he really has to work on, because he's not going to get on the field if he can't catch the ball consistently, and if a quarterback can't trust that you're gonna catch it, because Justin Herbert hates throwing interceptions. So if he can't trust that you're going to be in the right spot and that you're going to catch the ball that he throws to you, you're not going to see a lot of targets, frankly. And the coaching staff has to trust those things as well to put you on the field. So right now he's pretty clearly the 4th receiver on the depth chart, behind Joshua Palmer, who they took in the 3rd round 3 years ago. And we'll see if he can carve out a bigger role, if he can show some more consistency in terms of his hands.
People have suggested, I saw just yesterday online, somebody is suggesting they may trade Joshua Palmer.
Yeah.
They are pretty deep at wide receiver. They also drafted Johnston's teammate at TCU, Darius Davis. And Darius Davis is just probably one of the fastest receivers in this draft. He's probably the guy who runs off the coverage, I would imagine. How's Davis looked? Has he done anything in camp?
Yeah, well, first off, they're not trading Joshua Palmer. They love Joshua Palmer, and they love the depth that they have. And part of the Quentin Johnston experiment is that they have these 3 guys ahead of him that can play. So there's no rush, to get Quentin Johnston on the field. So that's not going to happen. In terms of Darius Davis, he's super undersized. Like he has that speed. He's like a 4.3, like a proper 4.3 guy. But he's really small. And so he's pretty much a slot only guy. He cannot play on the outside. And so like in the slot, you're just going to have fewer opportunities to attack that part of the field. So initially he's really like a punt return, kick return guy who maybe get into some gadget stuff, early on in the season offensively. But he did have an 81-yard punt return touchdown in the preseason opener. Like he's a real difference maker in that phase as a kick and punt returner. That's going to be his primary role. And we'll see if he can sort of carve out like a bigger offensive role as we move through this season. Probably it would come in later seasons as he's able to bulk up and grow into his body a little bit more.
How about Gerald Everett? I mean, Everett's got a ton of talent. Is this the year that he busts out at tight end? I mean, it seems like, some of the fantasy people are saying, hey, Gerald Everett could be a sleeper. Parham's a big guy too at tight end. He's a big bodied tight end. But what's Everett looking like this summer?
Yeah, they have legitimate receiving options in the tight end room. Like Gerald Everett had a really good year last year. I think they sort of had a vision for him to kind of take advantage of his athleticism and even his physicality as a yards after catch guy. And we saw that. I mean, he had a massive game in that playoff loss to the Jaguars, and really had a career year like across the board last year. But in terms of like fantasy implications, you always have to consider like who else is on the roster, right? And there's just so many guys to get the football to, and we haven't even mentioned Austin Eckler, who is one of the best receiving backs in the league. And so like Gerald Everett's a big piece of the offense. He's I think a little underrated in terms of how efficient he is in the red zone. He's good after the catch. And then Donald Parham as well, as you mentioned, like these are two legitimate receiving options. With the tight end room though, like I worry about the run blocking. They struggled run blocking last year as a group, and they didn't do anything to the room. So I think you're going to get some receiving production out of that group. The question is like, can they block well enough to improve the running game, which was really a priority for this coaching staff heading into the offseason.
We know Herbert's a great young quarterback, one of the best in the game. In this game, we may see Easton Stick, Trey Lance's teammate at North Dakota State, and Max Duggan. I always liked Max Duggan at TCU. Obviously, Herbert's big time, but tell us what you've seen this summer from Duggan and Stick.
Yeah, so they really put their eggs in the basket of Stick as their backup quarterback this year, and he hasn't played a lot. And so, I think a few things positive. He's really thrown the ball more accurately. I think like early on in his career too, he was very quick to bail out of the pocket when pressure came, which, to his credit, like he makes plays when that happens because he's a fantastic athlete and can really scramble and run around. But I think he's been better in terms of staying in the pocket and making some throws with pressure there. And like his accuracy is night and day from where he was, earlier on his career and even last year in training camp. He had a really good game in the first preseason game against the Rams, took a step back against the Saints. I think some of that was protection and it was just breaking down all around him and he had to move around, but I just didn't think he saw the field as well as he saw in that first game. So I think you've seen signs that he can be a good backup in this league, but I think they're looking for some more consistency. Max Duggan is a young player. I mean, you see the athleticism. I think like where he made, his career in college was as a runner, and that's like what he's going to be in the NFL initially. And we've seen him really take advantage of the edge on some of these zone reads and stuff, but we'll see who ends up playing on Friday because they did give Easton Stick the whole game on Sunday against the Saints. Like they really want him to get reps because he just hasn't played that much, and he lost an entire preseason in that 2020 COVID year. So there's a possibility that Easton Stick plays this whole game and that we don't see Max Duggan just because they're trying to get him reps to get him ready to be that backup quarterback for the team this year.
One of the reasons I love Telesco is just, this last draft is a good example. I mean, this guy really knows talent. Henley is a hell of a linebacker who can make a ton of tackles. I thought the Syracuse linebacker they got as a free agent, Mikel Jones, is a pretty good player. The safety they got a year ago, JT Woods, I think is a really good young player. I mean, these are three really good young players, in my opinion, that he got without spending high draft picks on those guys. How are those three guys in particular looking on this defense?
Yeah, I mean, JT Woods had a really rough rookie year, but they knew that he was raw when they drafted him. But they're really relying on him taking a big step. Like this is the year that really is going to either make or break his career because they moved Derwin James around so much that he's going to be that third safety. And so, Derwin's starting next to Alohi Gilman and JT Woods will be coming on, in certain nickel packages, in dime packages. And he really has to show an ability to A, tackle, and B, like take good angles on in the deep part of the field. And so he had a pretty disappointing rookie year, but they were sort of expecting him to go through some growing pains. And now he really has to take that next step. I think the last, let's say 2 weeks since that Rams preseason game, I've seen him really start to take that next step in terms of how he's recognizing things, how fast he's breaking on footballs, how consistent he is in the deep part of the field, how he's tackling, all of those things. And so there's some promising signs there, but I don't think he's a slam dunk by any means in terms of being like that really reliable guy in the back end. Deion Henley looked great on Sunday night against the Saints. I mean, you talk about athleticism and violence. Like that is his game. Like he just loves contact and he gets after people. What he showed Sunday night is that we haven't really been able to see in training camp because it's not live, is just a really sound ability to make tackles one-on-one in space, which like you need to play linebacker in today's NFL. So he's gonna go through some growing pains. He gave up a deep shot on a wheel route to a running back. He's young and it's going to take some time, but those instincts in the open field and in space and his ability to make tackles, and then how he is blitzing in terms of his physicality and his violence when he gets after running backs and pass protection, like that stuff is really translatable. And I could definitely see him being a big time linebacker. And then Michael Jones, we'll see. I think he has a shot to make the practice squad. He had a pass breakup in practice yesterday, kind of lower on the depth chart, but the Chargers are going to need some linebacker depth this year. They're a little bit thin there. And so he's definitely got a shot for the practice squad.
What has been Brandon Staley's whole game plan as far as playing the veterans? I mean, I'm just looking at some of the box scores in the preseason. I'm not seeing the names of the guys that we think of: Derwin James and Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack. Are these guys not playing in the preseason?
Yeah, he doesn't play like the top. It's probably like 20 to 25 guys at all in the preseason. So, and
does that come from Sean McVay and that experience, you think?
I think it's a combination of things. I think it's partly, being with Sean and how Sean went about things. But I think it's also partly how injured the Chargers typically get in training camp and just how much of an issue that's been for the organization for like as long as I can remember. And so I think ownership, when Brandon Staley got here, said, we need to get to week 1 healthy. Like that is your priority during training camp. And so he's done that successfully by taking this strategy. Now, has it translated early in the season? Keenan Allen had that hamstring injury in the second quarter of week 1 last year. So it's a give and take. Like I've just seen so many devastating things happen to this team in training camp. Derwin James got injured in back-to-back training camps, and that totally derailed the end of Anthony Lynn's tenure. And so getting through training camp healthy is a priority for the organization as a whole. And I think that's also part of the decision-making process for Brandon Staley when he's figuring out who's playing in these preseason games and who's not.
How good is this defense? Derek Ansley's the coordinator, and if you look at them individually, they've got some of the league's best individual talents. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James. I'm a big fan of Asante Samuel. J.C. Jackson obviously was a great player for years in New England. How good is this defense? And as you see it, what's the strength? What's the weakness?
Yeah, it hasn't been as good as the Chargers expected when they hired Brandon Staley. He led the league's best defense with the Rams, and that's a big reason why he got this job. And I don't think it's really materialized in the way that he was expecting or the Chargers were expecting. Year 1, it's hard to put a ton of stock into it because he didn't have his guys. It was a lot of players that were brought in under Anthony Lynn and Gus Bradley, which is like a polar opposite scheme and system. And so you expected some growing pains there. But for last year, he got everybody he wanted. They signed 2 defensive linemen. They signed J.C. Jackson. They traded for Khalil Mack. They signed Morgan Fox, who was on his Rams defense. They signed even Troy Reeder for a year, to bring in guys that he was comfortable with. And it just never – Bryce Callahan, another guy that played for Staley with the Broncos. But it never really came together. Some of that was obviously injuries. Joey Bosa got hurt in week 3, missed most of the year. J.C. Jackson ruptured his patellar tendon in week 7. They got cleaned out on the defensive line. I don't know if you remember that 49ers-Chargers game last year. They were down to 3 healthy defensive linemen by the end of the game against probably the best rushing attack in the league. And they still held the 49ers to 3.8 yards per carry in that game. So there's been signs of it sort of coming together. They played really well down the stretch last year, won 4 in a row to get into the playoffs. Remember that Dolphins game on Sunday night where they shut down, what had been to that point the most explosive offense in football. So there are signs that it will come together, but they have to stay healthy. And, you worry about some of the depth. So obviously you talk about strengths, their edge rusher duo has to be the start of that conversation because it might be the best duo in the league, but can they stay healthy? Now, I think they've shorted up a little bit. They drafted Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. He's looked really, really good in camp so far. They have a little bit more depth behind Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, but I think your strength starts there. The whole philosophy revolves around those 2 guys wrecking games. And so they have to be on the field for that to happen. And then I think what Derwin James allows Brandon Staley to do schematically is another strength of the defense. It makes it really hard to identify personnel packages pre-snap because Derwin plays 6 different positions. He can be weak side safety. He can be strong side safety. He can play their money position, which is like a safety linebacker hybrid position. In dime packages, he can play in the slot as their star or nickel corner. He can even play this position called the X, which is like almost like a slot edge rusher hybrid situation. And so like that's the big thing with Brandon Staley's
Sorry
defense.
about that.
No, you're good.
Hit the wrong button there.
Yeah, that's the big thing with Staley's defense is that they just are super multiple and it's super complex pre-snap. And then they also like do a lot of rotations, obviously post-snap. And Derwin James is like the linchpin for all of that because of how much they can move him around. So we'll see if it comes together. If they stay healthy, they have a lot of premium players, but you worry about some of the depth. You know, Kenneth Murray is going to be starting at linebacker. He's sort of a question mark. I already mentioned JT Woods. They don't have a ton of depth at corner. Asante Samuel Jr. is going to be playing in the slot. Obviously, a ball hawk and a playmaker in coverage, but a liability against the run. And the nickel corner, when they come on, is typically taking off in Staley's defense an interior defensive lineman. So that guy has to play the run. So you have some positives, you have some negatives, and we'll see if like they can finally put it together this season and be the defense that Staley's capable of building and calling.
You mentioned the USC second-round pick. I saw some highlights of him the other day. He just is looking amazing, isn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, how much of a role do you think he can play? I mean, he's sitting on the depth chart behind Khalil Mack, but, you can never use enough pass rush and enough impact guys. He looks like an impact guy on defense as a rookie.
Yeah, I think that might be the best pick of the draft so far through training camp because a lot of people had Thule projected more like third round. The Chargers went for him in the second round. I think they really needed an edge rusher, both for this season for depth and for, the post Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa world. He's just like a super high floor player, like effort, physicality at the point of attack. And I think like refinement in terms of his pass rush toolbox will come, but like his speed to power right now is a go-to move that can win against starting tackles. And then he's going to be really good in run defense, both in terms of playmaking and creating penetration and setting that edge when they need him to be that kind of stout anchor. He can do all of those things. And he's only 20 years old, right? Like he has so much to learn, so much to grow into physically. And he's learning from two technicians, two of the best in the game. And so like the Chargers should feel really good about where they're at with Tuli Tuipulotu. He's had a great preseason. He's looked great in training camp. Looks like he's going to be a real all-around player. I think like right now he looks like a solid starter in terms of projection, but if he can show some more refinement and some more, versatility and variety in his pass rush toolbox, you could see him turning into like a really, really good player for this team.
Couple last minutes with Daniel before we let him go. One of the big things I think if this team's going to turn it around, they got to be better inside their division. They only went 2-4 inside the division last year. They went 10-7, and a good road record, 5-4 on the road, but only 5-3 at home. And then you look closer and you go, man, 2-4 in the division. Why do they struggle in the division? And how much pressure is there on Brandon Staley? It seems like Staley's gotten some bad pub for going for it a lot on fourth down. How much belief do Chargers fans have in him?
Yeah. In terms of the division, like you're basically chalking up 2 losses every year to Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. So like if you're starting 0-2 every year, it's hard to be pretty good in the division. One of those division losses last year was that Week 18 game when they'd already clinched a playoff spot against the Broncos. So like there's some context there, but like if you're going up against Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs every year, it's going to be hard to be good in the division. They're really, really good, and they're really, really hard to beat. And the Chargers have played them close in pretty much every game since Staley's been here. And Patrick Mahomes has been that, horror movie villain just appearing at the end and, leading game-winning drives. And in terms of like, where Staley is at, like the conversation starts there too. It's a good segue because they have to contend for this division this year. They have to win. Like they have to win a playoff game. Like he's gotten everything that he wants personnel wise. Even this year they went out and got Eric Kendricks at linebacker, another guy that Staley is, super fond of and feels like can elevate his defense. So like they've invested money, they've invested in personnel, they've remade the roster. And now it's time for this team to take that step and like contend for the division and really make a run in the postseason. And I think like that's what fans expect, but more importantly, like I think that's what ownership expects. And so if like those things don't happen, then I think you have to reassess the whole operation from Staley up to Telesco and the personnel department, because it's been 11 seasons with Tom Telesco here and they have 2 playoff wins to show for it. So like you can build really good rosters, you can bring in really good talent, but if you don't win, like, unfortunately, like, that's the nature of the league. It's a bottom line business. And I think both guys are facing that reality right now.
Last one, going into this game tomorrow night, what's left to be decided? Like, what is there a key position battle you'll be honing in on, or what's the big subplot that you're focusing on the Chargers side of things going into the final preseason game?
Yeah, so I've got my Excel sheet, my running 53-man roster projection, which I'm sure a lot of beat writers have going. Yeah, there's not much left to decide. The one big one I'm looking at is like a fifth safety spot on the roster, and that's Mark Webb, who was a 7th-round pick out of Georgia in Staley's first season in 2021. Has always really flashed in training camp, but has never been able to stay healthy. Hamstring injury, knee injury during the season, and surgery, calf injury last year, and missed the 53-man, spent the whole season on the practice squad. And then he just had a groin injury last week and was able to come back, but missed the second preseason game. So, like, he's going to play a lot in this game. And if he plays well, I think he's on the 53-man. If he doesn't play well, I think they're going to use that roster spot elsewhere. So, not a big time name, but when you get to the third preseason game, you're really looking at these final, like, 2, maybe 3 spots. And then, the other thing I'd add is, like, if they don't end up keeping Mark Webb, where do they spend that extra spot? Elijah Dotson's a running back who really went off in week 1, but he's kind of tapered off since then. He had a couple big drops in the preseason game. He had another drop in practice this week. But with running backs, the evaluation comes in this live action, how you run in this live action. So definitely my main focus will be on Mark Webb, but I'll also be watching Elijah Dotson to see if he can maybe make that case in the final preseason game to be that 4th running back on the roster.
My good buddy Rick Mueller is the recruiting coordinator at Coastal Carolina, and you guys got Jared Clark. Is Clark and Matlock, these guys going to make it? They're rookies. And it seems like up front they've got some incredible edge guys, but how confident are the Chargers in that, those front 3 and their 3-4? And do you see Matlock and Clark making the squad?
Yeah, so Matlock's definitely on the roster. He's had a great camp. I think he showed some Brandon Staley said instincts and physicality. I think for me, it's been the athleticism at his size, like well over 300 pounds, 6'4", 34-inch arms. The way he moves is not like a guy of that size. And that showed up in the preseason game on Sunday night when he chased down a screen in the flat from his interior position, which was really impressive. So they've got 3 guys ahead of him and Sebastian Joseph Day, Austin Johnson, Morgan Fox, Scott Matlock's a lock. They got Nick Williams, who has played in Brandon Staley's scheme before in Chicago, kind of a veteran guy. So that's your 5. And then they really like Christopher Hinton. So if Jared Clark's going to make a push for the roster, it would be for that spot. But Christopher Hinton played for them last year when they were after that 49ers game when they had like pretty much no defensive lineman left. He came in down the stretch and played some good ball for them. So that 6 I'm pretty set on. But hey, if Jared Clark comes out and has 4 sacks tomorrow night, then maybe I'll make a change there.
Daniel, we appreciate your time, man. Enjoy your trip up here to Northern California. More importantly, enjoy that golf round, as well. And hopefully we'll catch up with you down the road. It was really a pleasure to have you on the show.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
There you go. Daniel Popper from The Athletic giving us a preview of 49ers Chargers and giving us a little bit of the flavor of the Chargers side. And as you can see, I mean, all teams have their challenges, their roster battles, and the Chargers are no different. They've got a lot of talent, but it is interesting how he said that, even though Telesco is considered a top GM, there's still, it's all about what have you done? Have you won games? Have you won playoff games? Are you contending for titles? Chargers have a ton of talent if you're looking at that roster. Mike Williams, Quentin Johnson, Keenan Allen at wide receiver. Left side of that line, Rashawn Slater, Zion Johnson. Really, really nice. Sawyer was a sleeper that they got in the 6th round out of Georgia last year at right guard. Gerald Everett's a top tight end. Herbert's a franchise-type quarterback. Eckler is a tremendous back. A lot of their deal is about health. Can they just stay healthy? And then on defense, they've got some of the great individual talents in the sport. Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, J.C. Jackson, Derwin James, Asante Samuel. I mean, they got a lot there, but it's a little bit of a projection. And can they overtake the Chiefs in that division and become a power in the AFC. I think they're a sleeper team for the Super Bowl. I really do. I think the Chargers are a team to watch for in this Super Bowl race. All right, let's do this. I want to hit the chat here in just a second. Got a couple thoughts on the 49ers I'm going to share with you coming up next. But first, let's thank our sponsors. We're brought to you by Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com, 415-883-3030. Great company. If you have a crack in your windshield, you need someone to replace it for you, marinautoglass.com is for you. Also, New York Style Sausage Company. The only kind of sausage that I will eat is New York Style sausage. You can find them in any of your local Bay Area or Northern California grocery stores, Safeway, Costco, you name it. New York style sausage is awesome. And of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. 2 locations, Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week in both spots from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. or until they run out. And here's their spot in Corte Madera in Marin County.
So New York Style Sausage was started over 70 years ago. We are the largest producer of fresh Italian sausage on the West Coast.
What makes our sausage in New York Style is really the recipe came from back east, from New York, from Connecticut.
If you look at all of our labels, there's maximum 4 or 5 ingredients, which we're really proud of.
There's no preservatives, no MSG, fresh in, fresh out.
The pork comes in fresh, goes out fresh. There's never any freezing throughout the process. We've always used fine quality cuts. We're never going to deter from that. It's one of the reasons why our sausage is so good. I guarantee you put our sausage up against anybody else's from a flavor standpoint, no one will beat it, hands down.
Hey, do yourself a favor and do me a favor. Go buy a package of the New York Style Italian sausage. Guaranteed you will love it. Guaranteed.
All right, welcome back to the Krueg Show. Thanks to Daniel Popper from The Athletic, Chargers beat writer, for stopping by and talking a little Charger football in advance of tomorrow night's Niner-Charger tilt at Levi's Stadium. And, of course, we'll be there for that. 7 o'clock starts because it's going to be a late night at Levi's. All right, obviously the talk here in the Bay Area is about Trey Lance. And what's going to happen. And in the last 24 hours, it seems like we've gotten all kinds of conflicting reports. Kyle Shanahan, it seemed to indicate yesterday that they were going to trade Trey Lance by making Sam Darnold the number 2 quarterback. Kyle Shanahan expressed that Trey was not happy with the news, told him to take the rest of the day off. Also, the talk is that he's back in the building today. John Lynch said on KMBR that he feels like the most likely resolution is that Lance will be on the 49er roster. At this point, it's really hard to gauge. What are you going to do with Brandon Allen? You're not going to go with 4 quarterbacks. Shanahan also seemed to indicate if Trey wanted out, that they would try to accommodate him. There's a wide variety of opinions as far as what his trade value is or isn't. There's people that suggest that the 49ers may get a second or third round pick if they include another asset with Lance in a trade. Other general managers seem to think they'll get a late round pick. There's general managers that believe that he's an untradeable asset, probably largely due to his contract. There was speculation that one of the reasons that he wasn't practicing is they don't want him to get hurt. So that would hurt his trade value. Now there's talk that he may actually play tomorrow night. So I'm not sure exactly what to believe other than Sam Darnold is going to be number 2. Brock Purdy is going to be number 1. And after that, we really don't know. We don't know. Is Trey going to be here? Is he not going to be here? Do they want to trade him? Do they not want to trade him? Have they been shopping him? Diana Rossini of ESPN indicated that they've been shopping him all year. John Lynch kind of refuted that. They've not been shopping him all year. So what's the deal? Do they want to go the distance with Trey and have him on their roster as number 3, and they just feel more confident that Darnold is more ready to go right now, and so Darnold's number 2? Is that all talk so they can maintain value in a trade for Trey? Is it posturing? Is it not? We don't really know. We don't really know. Is he going to play tomorrow night? Is he not? I guess if it was up to me, and I expressed this about a week ago, that I would rather keep him than give him away. Just because they've had a bunch of injuries at quarterback. He is an improving player. If he were a jerk that everybody hated, it would be one thing, but he's not. He's a great kid that everybody loves. So to me, that kind of impacts things. It's not like, get him out of here. Get him out of here. This guy can't be here. He's going to ruin the chemistry. I don't see that happening. But at the same time, I'm sure he's very disappointed to not be number 2. There's a lot of debate back and forth. If you're a Trey fan, you're saying, hey, he outplayed Sam Darnold. He should be number 2. Of course, those same people were saying that he should have been number 1 in front of Brock Purdy before camp started. So I'm not sure how much credibility they have. But at the same time, if you ask me, I would say that that Sam and Trey were relatively even on the practice field all summer. Some days Trey was better. Some days Sam was better. If you asked me to evaluate it, I would say Trey has a higher ceiling than Darnold, but that Sam has maybe a higher floor than Trey. Sam might be a little bit more dependable because he's played more and you kind of know what you're getting. But other people would push back and say that Sam is more proven that he can't do it because you've seen him fail a lot more than you've seen Trey Lance fail. I think that right there in a nutshell is what makes it so difficult for so many people to wrap their head around this Trey Lance story is they feel like they haven't seen Trey really been given big opportunities and fail. And if he had, then maybe they wouldn't be such fans. But I think most people, and obviously the Niners have seen him in meetings, the Niners have seen him in practices, but for the fans have only seen him in a handful of games, and they haven't seen him. I mean, the Raider game was bad. He definitely didn't look good in the Raider game. But the Denver game, I thought in the second half, he looked really good. 8 of 10 on the last 2 drives, and if that's the last time he played, I mean, that looks pretty good. Led the game-winning drive, was 8 of 10 on his last 2 drives, threw some really, really good balls in that game. So, I don't know what the story is. Do they want to trade him and they're posturing? Do they want to trade him but only at their price? Do they not want to trade him but just, don't want him to be the number 2 because they feel like Darnold is better or more reliable? I don't know. I mean, this is a baffling 24 hours simply because yesterday they made Sam the number 2. Trey didn't go to practice. I thought they were keeping him out because they didn't want to get him hurt. Then it came out today that Kyle Shanahan basically said, go home. Go home. You're upset. Think about it for a day. We'll talk tomorrow. Supposedly the talk is that he's back in the building today, but back in the building doesn't mean anything necessarily. They're not practicing today. Obviously, they play tomorrow, so you don't practice the day before the game. But I guess it sounds like it's almost like in Trey's hands. Like if Trey wants to be here, there's a possibility he could be here. If Trey doesn't want to be here, they'll try to move him. It doesn't sound like the 49ers are going to get anything out of this. So if it really comes down to the Niners get nothing and Trey moves on and gets a fresh start, or Trey stays, this story has already had a bunch of weird twists and turns. So if it comes right down to, fresh start and you're moving him on for nothing at all, and you can't turn Trey Lance into any asset at all that helps you win this year or sets you up better for next year, I would rather keep him. I'd rather keep him. Now, what does that mean to Brandon Allen? I don't know. I told the live stream last night that I really believe that Brandon Allen, signed here to be the third string quarterback, and that his agent probably got some assurance that if he wasn't going to be the third string quarterback, that they were going to cut him free and give him 3 or 4 days to find a new gig where he could play for the league minimum instead of playing on the practice squad for a fraction of the league minimum. So I kind of believe that's probably the case. So I would imagine, don't tell me that they're going to carry 4 quarterbacks. To me, carrying 4 quarterbacks is negligence. Pure negligence. There's too many competitive roster spots available on this team to carry 4 quarterbacks. You don't have the roster space. Just not possible. And people would say, well, you could do it. Yeah, but you're going to do it at being short in another area. You're going to carry 1 less offensive lineman, 1 less defensive lineman, 1 less linebacker, 1 less corner. This is a very, very, very competitive roster. So at the end of the day, if you ask me, what do I believe? I believe the Niners want to go with Brandon Allen, Sam Darnold, and obviously Brock Purdy as their starter, and that they'll probably move Trey. And there's been a couple different people. I speculated yesterday I could see him going to the Vikings. The Vikings BYU rookie has not particularly played well this summer, and he looks really, really raw. I don't know if you guys, how much you're following Viking football, but the Vikings have Nick Mullins behind Kirk Cousins, and they have Jaron Hall, who they drafted in the 5th round out of BYU, as their number 3. Well, Jaron Hall has struggled, and he's a good athlete, and, it sounds like he's slated for the practice squad himself. But if I'm the Chargers, if I'm the Vikings, they've got Kevin O'Connell, who's a good offensive coach. They don't have their quarterback of the future, you would think, on the roster. And Kirk Cousins is probably, 1 more year and then moving on. If I were the Vikings, I would like to have Trey Lance. But he also carries a significant cap figure. And they're not going to give you – people were suggesting the Niners get Danielle Hunter. I don't think they're giving away Danielle Hunter. I think my guess is if the Vikings came calling, the best the Niners could do would be, Marcus Davenport or, DJ Wanham or Andre Carter, somebody, Andre Carter II. Or, there's been a lot of speculation that the Vikings are going to move off of their 2nd-round pick from last year, Andrew Booth Jr., the former Clemson corner, who's talented, but he's had a ton of injuries. He's got injuries going back to college, back to high school. He was injured a little bit at Clemson. He's been injured with the Vikings. I got Chargers on the brain right now. Booth would give the Niners another corner. I could see Booth or Davenport coming to the 49ers in some kind of a pick. It's not going to be some really good return for Trey Lance. I'm pretty convinced of that. So at the end of the day, if it's not going to be a good return, I'd rather just keep him. To me, there's a value to having an insurance policy as good as Trey sitting right there. There's value to that. What's it worth? That's speculation, but there's some value there. So I don't want to move off of him. I really don't, especially if you're not going to get anything. All right, let's hit the chat. Always Drip 805 says, but Larry, hear me out, Larry, hear me out. That's from last night's stream. JW says, I'm perturbed. That's a great word, perturbed. JW, explain why you are perturbed. Somebody says N'Keal Harry. No, N'Keal Harry's concussions. Joey Nichols says N'Keal Harry flat out can't play football. I'm not sure why he came up. Probably somebody else. Golden Sam says 3 first-round picks. Damn. Micah Parsons, Tristan Wirfs, Kyle Pitts, and a second-round pick. Ugh. Yeah, I know. For fact's sake. But Larry, that was last night on the show. Oh, Vikings just released N'Keal Harry. N'Keal Harry doesn't separate, has had a history of concussions. Oh, my God, Terradome, don't say it. What if the Vikings gave us Nick Mullins for Trey Lance? Talk about full circle. No! God, no. Eric should have taken Micah Parsons. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that you can say definitively, and I don't think the Niners would even push back, is the Niners kind of blew this. I mean, they had their options. They had their choices. They gave up a lot of draft capital to move up for a player that they really aren't, don't seem like has any kind of a future. So, it's just it's a tough situation for sure for the 49ers. But to me, I wouldn't make it worse. I wouldn't make it worse by just handing him away. I wouldn't. I'd rather take a chance that he develops while not playing than just hand him to Minnesota or another team for a 7th-round pick. And to me, people will say, well, you owe it to Trey. You owe it to your fans and you owe it to your franchise to do what's best for your franchise. If you're a general manager, your allegiance is not to any individual player. Your allegiance is to Jed York. Your allegiance is to Kyle Shanahan. Your allegiance is to the roster, to the fans, to the organization. That's where your allegiance is. So I don't really want to hear, well, they owe it to Trey to give him up for nothing. No. I don't believe that. They owe it to their fans to get something for the asset. They owe it to the team to get something for the asset or to keep the asset. Michael says, I say Trey got screwed by the 49ers and by Coach Kyle. Let Trey play Friday night and see how he does. What a circus that would be. Keep Trey because I think he will start because Purdy or Darnold could get hurt or be bad quarterbacks. What's the reaction tomorrow night if he plays? Does he get a standing ovation? Or is it a smattering of cheers and boos? Is it a conflicted crowd? Or is it a crowd that's like, you know what? No, we're giving this guy a major ovation. El Camilo Dorado. Stop the drama, Larry. I know drama sells. It's not drama. This is the talk. This is the dialogue. That's what we do here. We talk about what's going on with the 49ers. At least that's what I do. I don't deify people. I don't make anybody a villain. I just talk about the topics at hand. Oh my God, Michael, trade Trey and Debo for Kirk Cousins. He said Kirk Cousin, but I'm pretty sure he meant Kirk Cousins. Alberto says Chase Young for Trey. Yeah, I mean that would be great. Bottom line is they need more defensive end. They don't know if they're going to have Bosa. I don't know what their backup defensive ends are going to look like. Digital Drew in the house says, "Sup, Larry? Have an awesome show." Well, it was nice having Popper on. Matt Money Smith is going to join us, the Chargers announcer, at 11:30. So in about a little bit over a half hour, we'll talk a little bit with the Chargers announcer, Matt Money Smith, who's a big name in Southern California. You probably caught him with Petros and Money. He used to do a show with Petros Papadakis. So Matt's going to join us, I believe, right around 11:30. So, and then of course tonight at 6:30, the big show. Jesse and Vish and I will break it all down, chop it up. We'll be going to town tonight. I believe it's on Vish's channel. So if you haven't joined Vish Kumaran's channel, 6:30 tonight, me, Jesse, and Vish go live, and it should be big. Well, I'm sure Vish will have a ton to say. Jesse will have a ton to say. I probably won't have much to add. No. Of course, I'll get in there, say a few things as well. All right, that is going to do it for us. check us out in about a half hour with Matt Money Smith. We'll talk a little bit more about Chargers-Niners, get a little preview of the Chargers. And then I'm going to take the afternoon off. I got a conference call, some sales stuff I want to do. And then at 6:30 tonight, me, Vish, and Jesse on the Vish Kumaran Show. Always drip, says Larry. Have a call-in show with all three of you there, Jesse and Vish. I'll ask those guys, hey, let's take some calls. Let's do it. I'm sure they'd be up for it. We had fun last night. Last night was fun. I love doing calls, and we're going to do calls every week on the show. I'm not sure exactly what day, but we're definitely going to do calls, video calls, like we did last night. We went for 3 hours last night with video calls, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you guys did as well. But that does it for this stream. We'll see you in about a half hour with Matt Money Smith talking more Niners Chargers. Until then, peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful, you gon' get exactly what you asked for. Here for whatever you bring me, getting handled. I answer to no one. I don't